everybody. Welcome to this Fireside Chat, which is an awesome initiative, of course, put on by pocstock, and I'm excited to be here. So I first want to check in with you all because while we are celebrating Black dads, it's been a week, it's been a month, it's been a year, right? 2020. So I just want to see how you guys, how are you doing? First of all, before we get started, how are you doing? All things considered, I just want to check the temperature. So Lamont, Charles, if you could open your microphone, how you doing?
You know, it's been a year. I mean, I say it's been a year, but it's only 6 months. So, you know, regardless if you have kids or not, what we're seeing right now is a generational shift, you know, and to be a part of this is something that we'll be able to go back and just not only tell our kids about and grandkids, but, you know, I've got a senior in high school. And so just to live this year through his eyes, it's been tough. So yeah, it's been a year.
Yeah. So you have one. So how many children do you have?
So I have 5 actually. So I've got 3 girls and 2 boys. So they go from 22, 21, 18, 12, and 4.
Nice. Okay. That's. Let's see. You got some millennial and dreamers, Gen Z, or all? You said all under 18.
All under 22 and down.
All under 22. That's right. So you two generations there. Were you there when they were born? Can you talk? Absolutely. Okay. In the delivery room, talk a little bit about the beginning. You know, I mean, you've been through it. You're a veteran at this.
Yeah, I mean, the first child, obviously, that's the scariest one because, you know, I had never experienced anything like that. But at the same time, you want to be there for your kids. You know, I wouldn't miss the birth of any of my kids for the world. And my wife, who unfortunately is deceased now, she every single child that we would have, it would come much faster. And so, you know, it scared me on the 5th. You know, we didn't even have a chance to park the car. So I rush, get inside. But it was just the experience of seeing your child being born, to see this life into this world is an amazing thing. And as a father, you know, it's, again, just moments like that, you don't forget for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. Let's go over to you. So Charles, the first question is, how are you? And then how many children do you have? We'd love to hear. And were you there in the delivery room?
So I'm maintaining. You know, there are a lot of things converging on us now. It's been a year. It's been 3 months. So all things considered, I feel fortunate for the health of my family and my loved ones. We're safe. We're secure. So in that way, I'm good. I'm a dad of 2 daughters. I can beat Lamont's range because I have a grown daughter who is 31 and about to deliver in 2 weeks. So I'm about to be a granddad. And then I have a stepdaughter who's 11. So I like to joke that at least now I feel like I have some idea of what I'm doing. It was the first time I didn't have a clue. I was 25 when she was born. I wasn't there because we did not have, it wasn't in the advent of cell phones, and she was born 3 weeks early. So it turned out that I was away at a business meeting and away from my phone. So I missed the birth, but when I finally made it to the hospital and she was placed in my arms, I just could not stop crying. Like the wave of emotions that came over me, that is a moment that I will never forget. But the wave of emotions that came over me, I just could not stop the tears from flowing down my face. And it's an emotion that I really can't describe.
Wow. And now you're going to be a granddad.
Now I'm going to be a granddad. So I guess we're going to have that happen all over again.
Wow. A G-pop. All right. Let's hear from Benny Boone. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Maintaining.
All things considered, I mean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's been like, you know, it's been a crazy 6 months. I honestly, when Kobe died, I thought the world stopped. You know, it shifted everybody's perspective of what life was. when you saw somebody like that. And, you know, and I think every dad here and every dad around, you know, imagined that last moment. And the only thing that I could think about was, man, at least they had each other together. And so, you know, that moment came and we're mourning. And before we could even finish mourning him, you know, COVID-19 hits, and then it becomes, the world is completely unlike we've ever seen it before. I got sick with COVID-19, with coronavirus. My wife got sick. So I was sick for about 6 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks, dealing with the coughing and the no taste and no smell, all of those symptoms that everyone, you know, talks about as various symptoms. And in that time, concerned about my children. You know, I have four children. One is 19, and then my wife and I have 3 that live with us. One in 13, 9, and 7. So it's 2 boys, 2 girls, and 2 of the kids have asthma. So we were like, you know, we were terrified about them catching it and that stuff. So it's been rough. It's been rough. I think emotionally, you know, we're very grounded spiritually. So we lean heavy into that. And so, you know, that's really the only thing that's the constant thing that's been able to get us through this time. But it's been difficult. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity for us to talk amongst each other about these things, especially in this environment. And this, you know, this coming together is something interesting that has developed out of us not being able to physically get together, is these sort of pop-up sort of forums that I've spoken on quite a few on other different topics and stuff. So we still connected. And then now we're dealing with, you know, with something that, as people, I'm not gonna say people of color, I'm gonna say Black people, we've dealt with all of our lives, you know. So it's just very interesting. I know we'll get into that, but this is just an interesting time because people are like, is every, you know, surprised. And I know nobody here is surprised. Like, we know what this is about. You know, we've been screaming this for a long time. As far as delivery, yes, I've been there for the delivery of every one of my children. Each time it felt different each time. I will say, when I had 2 boys first, when my girls were delivered, it was I can't really describe that. It was so complete. You know, it was like it was my first daughter. She's 9 now, and when she came out and I had her in my arms, it just was like, you know, I just felt like a complete father because I had created a girl. You know what I mean? So it was just interesting. Different. I had a different feeling from my boys being born than my girls.
Yeah. You know, that's interesting. We're gonna come back to that. I want to go to Corey, but we're going to come back to this girl thing and girl dad and Kobe. So we want to put a pause there. And Corey, so I saw your reaction when Benny Boone started talking about his daughters. So do you have daughters? How many kids?
That is all that I have. I don't have any boys. I've only got girls.
You're a girl dad, so you want to pick up where Benny left off, and his whole disposition, like his girls shifted the atmosphere the moment they got here.
Absolutely. It's you know, the running joke is I wouldn't even know what to do with a boy at this point. Like I've been so conditioned by these girls. I'm literally the only man in my house. We just got a puppy literally 2 weeks ago, and she's a girl. So I'm literally the only testosterone running through this house, and it's a challenge at times, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And so you ask how are we, and the reason I'm okay is because of my family. You know, it is, as everybody said, you know, these are challenging times for a variety of reasons. It's been interesting how, for the Black community in particular, you go from COVID to, you know, the current events of civil unrest and social injustice. And the one statement that's been consistent through both episodes is stay safe, right? Initially, stay safe meant stay safe from COVID. Now, when I sign off or when I'm talking to my fellas or my brothers and I say stay safe, yeah, I'm still talking about COVID, but not so much not so much anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so it's been interesting times, and professionally, I'm in the diversity and inclusion world, and so everything that's going on recently, I've literally had to address all day, every day in the workplace. And so, the challenge is you're talking about it all day at work, trying to make people comfortable, essentially, around what's going on in the world. I'm dealing with this personally and emotionally at home. I've got teenage daughters, and I've had to talk the talk, which I know we're going to get into. I have to have the talk with them because even though they're women, they're Black, and they're not exempt from any of the issues that are going on in this world right now. Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, all of these names that resonate and say their names. I've had to have that conversation with them. And, so my girls range 19, 17, and then I have a stepdaughter who's 15. And so, they're all mine. I didn't create the last one, but she's mine too. And so, I'm having these conversations with them around what's going on in society, and it's hard. And again, I don't get a break because I'm talking about it all day at work. I'm talking about it at home. It's impacting me personally. My oldest daughter, she calls me and she's in tears because she's like, you travel so much for work. I'm worried about you when you're on the road. And she's got a boyfriend and she's worried about him when he walks around in the streets. And, no 19-year-old, Black, white, purple, green, should have to have that heaviness on their mind and on their heart. And so I've got to deal with that as her dad, but they're all awesome. They're all safe. They're all beautiful. Wouldn't trade them for the world. And yes, for the two I did create, I was in the room when they were born. I can't even begin to put into words what that experience is like. These gentlemen attempted to do it. I'm not even going to try. It's an experience that is unlike any other, and it was beautiful. And at the end of the day, you look at this little thing that's in your arms, and you're like, I created that, and that's the best feeling in the world.
Wow. And thank you for sharing that. So there's this interesting thing when I see men and Black dads talk about their daughters. And so while you all have been rebranded for some time, right, there was a time when, people would talk about deadbeat dads. We are clearly beyond that. And I think because we live in a highly social digital world, that helped amplify Black dads. Like, Black dads are doing amazing things and there really are great dads. And so we've been seeing that, for a couple of years. But one of the things that happened when Kobe and Gigi passed is the amplification of the girl dad. And so something happened, I guess, with you guys, with your daughters. I know you love all of your children, but I've even heard or seen Dwayne Wade have a conversation about him having all the boys in the house. I'm like, we need a girl. Like, we just have all these guys. And so who wants to share a little bit about, just being a dad to a girl over, a dad to a boy, and yeah, just the difference in that and what that does for you. I mean, Benny Boone, you talked a little bit about it, right? You had your boys and then you had your daughter, and it was just the fact of creating another human being, but it was of another gender. Mm-hmm. So do you want to elaborate a bit on that? And then I'd love to hear from anybody else who has boys and girls.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have two daughters, so it's 9 and 7. So they're the younger ones. My oldest son, it was just, having a child, and it'd be what movie is that? Oh, I think Godfather is like, let your child be a masculine child. When Luca Brasi is talking to the Godfather, to the Don, let your grandchild be a masculine one. It's a very interesting concept of, men wanting that first kid to be a boy. So I was the same way. I was like, I want to see the ultrasound and the thing. And I don't know what that's about. I don't know where that comes from. And then, you just want your child to be healthy. You want everything to be right. And then it's great. Then you have another boy and it's like, oh man, this is great. And then you start to go, okay, if I have another one, it'd be great to have a girl. And then the girl comes, and it's different. You know, you handle children the same way. I mean, the physical handling of babies, you know, the feeding and the changing and all that stuff. But when they grow up, you just deal with them differently. And, you know, and I gotta admit, there is that word toxic masculinity is tossed around a lot. And you know, it's an interesting word for me because I just know how I was raised, you know what I mean? And I wouldn't call it toxic masculinity when you're in certain, not necessarily, when you're in certain environments and raised a certain way in a certain time period. It's just kind of what it is to survive, you know. Being able to go out. I was the only child. My father got remarried, and I have a stepsister, but I was the only child growing up. And so as a boy, I had to, you know, I grew up in Philly, and it was in the 70s, and it was tough. You had to fight one kid, and then once you fought that kid, if he had a brother, you had to fight the brother. Like, it's just kind of what it was. And so I always felt like, man, I want my son to have a brother. I never want my kids to feel like outnumbered, right? And so now I got 4. So for the boys, that's okay. For the girls, I don't want them out in the street fighting. Like, I don't want my boys out in the street fighting, but I don't, you know what I mean? I have such a different idea of life for them. You know, and I treat them different. I speak to them differently. I tolerate different things from them that I don't from the boys. So it's different. I just don't know how to explain it. I really don't. It's just something that, you know, maybe somebody else could. I just don't know how to really explain it.
Anybody else want to chime in?
You know, I think where I grew up in Chicago, bad neighborhood, you know, you see a lot of abuse, unfortunately, directed towards the women, especially in my household. I'm the youngest of 4, was the youngest of 4. I lost my brother. So I have 2 sisters. And so, you know, the relationships that I saw them in, the relationship that I saw my mom in, there was a lot of abuse. And so I think as a father, there's a natural protection that you have, you know, for this child. You know, you assume that your boys are going to grow up and they're going to emulate you and they're going to grow up strong physically. But when it comes to the girls, you know, there's such a precious feeling about, I need to protect this child, and I also need to show her the example of a father, of a man, so that when she goes out and she chooses whoever that person is, you know, they don't have to get into situations that's going to take me to prison. You know, I always try to tell my kids that, you know, don't put me in a situation that I'm going to have to defend you to the point where I'm going to have to go to jail, because you don't want to see anybody, you know, hurting your child, especially when it comes to a girl. So yeah, I mean, there's just there's a double standard, and it's okay, because it's supposed to be, because our job is to be a protector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you know what, well, I'll ask a question here. Who else here grew up with your dad? Anybody want to share? You have dad stories, Corey?
Yeah. So again, just listening to Lamont and Benny talk about it, you know, it's interesting because I grew up with my father, but I have a sister. And the way my father treated me versus the way he treated my sister were night and day. And for the very reasons that both Benny and Lamont shared, there's almost this notion or idea like, all right, he's going to get in trouble, but he'll figure it out. As the father of a daughter, you are just naturally trying to make sure that they avoid trouble at all costs. And it's just a protector in you. And you go out of your way to ensure that the elements that surround them are safe and nurturing.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way to put it. Boys, you say, no, you got to go through a little scuffle so that you come out of it on the other side stronger. Mm-hmm. And so it's been very interesting because, again, my sister had a very different upbringing than I did, so to speak. And then I also became her protector as well because she's younger than me. So literally, I have friends that I grew up with. I fought all my friends because of my sister. And we survived it and we got through it. But, you know, that is part of the process.
Yeah.
She did something to annoy them. They snapped back and now I've got to step in. And as a father, you do the same thing. And so you have this I don't know, I don't want to call it a conflict, but you have this energy where you want to raise strong, independent women.
Yeah.
Right? So that they actually never have to rely or depend on a man, but you are doing everything in your world to protect them and make sure that nothing bad happens to them. So you have to expose them to the world so they're independent and strong, but you also need to protect them from the dangers of the world as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know what? So why don't we? That's a good point to pivot in terms of the dangers of the world. And so this is a difficult question. In fact, my heart, my heart hurts for us as Black people, but my heart really hurts for Black men, Black dads. So I want to ask the question: have you ever been really afraid and scared for your kids? And I want you, if you can, just talk about it, considering what we're going through right now. So who wants to share about, being scared and being afraid and having that kind of conversation? Who wants to chime in here?
I mean, that just is sort of like being a parent, though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because there's so many dimensions of fear given, just the makeup of our world. And so, as Corey was talking about, it was so important to me, the role model for my daughter, the treatment that she should expect. This is my grown daughter. I was kind of the tough dad and still am on my younger daughter, because the world, I knew the world would not regard them the way that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was so important to me that they have grit and that they have resilience and that they're prepared with that armor that they're going to need to step out into the world. And with all of that preparation, you just can't be there all the time. And so that fear is constant. It still exists to some extent with Morgan, my grown daughter, but my husband's a great guy, so I feel like I got some help there. It's more his responsibility than mine now. But I just feel like whether it's a racial situation or any of the other things that life can throw at your kids, I actually feel like it's just a constant state of fear. I can't point to any particular thing, but that protection that everyone has talked about, it is just an element of being a parent, and it never really goes away.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like, growing up, we had, I lived in a neighborhood where everyone watched everyone. So we were out in the streets playing football or tag or whatever it was. And we had to be in, when the street light came on. Every now and then somebody would look out their window, a parent would look out the window. If one of your friends was going home to eat lunch or dinner, you watched them. All the game stopped until they got to the house, or somebody walked with them. I don't know if that happens anymore. That was a very unique time, and I really wish we could get back to that, where your neighbors. There was a block captain, in the block. And see, the other thing I was thinking about. I'm not trying to get off topic, but I was thinking about everything that's happening. And when you see all this stuff and people filming all these things, and you have people so-called trespassing, or the police show up and they apprehend us in the street. On any street in any urban city, when we were kids, there was a block captain there. So when a police officer came, that block captain, he knew that person's number and address. They would go get that person. They would come outside. Do you know this person? Are they supposed to be here? Or that person would be observant while an arrest was happening. We have lost community. We've lost it. We've given up community for ascension, for us to live move out of the, I'll say, ghetto to all these other places and live a better life for ourselves. But within that, we've created our own bubbles. So we don't necessarily know our next door neighbor or the person down the street. And if their kid is in the street riding a bike and gets hit by a car, or God forbid, snatched up, we don't know who to call, or it just doesn't exist anymore. And I really wish we could get back to that. And that would help us all as a community be able to, what your question was about protection, right? Like, everybody seeing, even if it's not your kid, my kid plays with that kid. who's he over there? Why is he talking to that person? And then that dad walk over, hey, do you know him? No, he just stopped. Okay, you keep going. Doesn't happen anymore. We lost that. We need that back. We really do.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll jump in because again, for me, you talk about fear. As these girls have gotten older, I think the fear has changed over time, and the two older ones both have their licenses and they drive. And so the fear is, okay, I don't go to sleep until they come back in the house. You just want to make sure they get home safe, whatever they're doing. It's not that they're out doing anything bad. It's just the world, right? Like, you want to make sure that they have made it home. And so, and my parents did the same thing with me. When I finally started driving and I was running around, and I was doing way worse things once I had my license, but they're good kids, they're great kids, but you just never know what happens. And so the fear changes over time. It never goes away. It's just a different kind of fear. When they were younger, you'd worry they'd scrape their knee. Now it's like, okay, you've got a curfew, and yeah, you're older, so it can be late. You can come home at X time, but until you hear that door open, you're on pins and needles. And so, it's just been interesting to see how your parental issues change as they get older.
Yeah. So how do you all prepare your children now? I mean, because Benny, you mentioned, right, we live in a very different world. And so the raising of your children and the conversations have to be different from when you have block captains. So how are you all preparing your children for when they go out? I mean, Corey's talking about when his girls go out, he's up until they come back. How are you preparing, considering what we're seeing just play out now that is so painful? And, whether they're out in the street or whether they are at home playing video games with the nephew or sleeping in their bed, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. So I want to have that conversation. How are you preparing your kids right now?
We have open discussion. The news or those programs are on often, and they can see it. And I say, look, if you guys have any questions about what's going on, I will explain it to you. And it's a tough conversation to have. My girls are a little young to really understand what's going on, but my 13-year-old son is the person who I'm targeting about what's happening, because this is all in his mind and spirit, and he sees this and he's taking it all in a different way than the younger kids are, and he's a teenager now. So there's more liberties I want to give him, right? I don't think he's walked around to the store without one of us or his uncle with him or something like that. And we live in New York City. And I want to give him some liberties, but when I see this stuff, God forbid a cop stop him, he'll have absolutely no idea what to do. If a cop stops him in the street when he's going to get some bubble gum or something, he will not know what to do. So I have to arm him, unfortunately, with things that he has to do just in case one of us is not around. Or if he's with me and the police stop us, this is what I need you to do. I need you to be completely quiet and let me speak. Don't say anything. Don't get scared. So it's not just preparation about them. It's preparation about the entire situation, because we could be in the car and all of us get stopped and they could see something awful happen to me from the police. I need them to be aware of what's going on for all of us,
Mm-hmm. Charles?
It's changed some, but I think obviously the conversations have to be age appropriate, but it really is about just being real, and not sugarcoating it, but at the same time not painting a completely doomsday picture. And so, I can recall as Morgan was coming up that her mom had several white friends, and so I would talk to her about just sort of the other side of that many of the people that were in her life were wonderful people, but that everyone wasn't going to be that way. And she would give me the, oh, Dad, come on. And then I remember she got to high school and things had flipped by then. And she saw different types of white folks and encountered racism and encountered some discrimination. And at one point while she was in high school, they actually staged a walkout. And so I kind of reminded her of some of those early conversations. And so I feel like some of it is just planting seeds. You know, some of it is what Benny is talking about, is that preparation. And even if they don't receive it immediately, you want it to be in them so that they're equipped when they need it. And so for Grace, who's 11, we have candid conversations because, you know, the same things are on our TVs and she sees these things and she'll ask questions. And so, again, without, you know, scaring her, we do still have very candid conversations with her so that, again, we're planting those seeds. She may not have encountered situations where she needs all this information right now, but you want them to be equipped with it when that time comes, because there is a likelihood that it will come.
You know, if I can hop in, just like Corey, I'm in diversity. I've been in diversity for 15 years. And, you know, I think my kids saw me live it. And so the beautiful part about it is that it then becomes a platform for you to be able to have a conversation. And so lately, what the thing that's been great about it, my older kids, they live it. So my kids are biracial. And so I don't think they didn't grow up like I did. You know, they didn't grow up on the west side of Chicago where, you know, I have personal examples of mistreatment, you know, with the law officials there, but they didn't have that. So they only heard the stories, which is one of the reasons why I wrote the book, so that they can understand, you know, just this is what I went through. But now they're able to see it. So even if they can't live it personally, they see it. And so we then have those conversations. So my oldest daughter, she actually works for my company. So she's responsible for our social media. And the beautiful part about it is that her job is to go out there and just find quotes that she can put out there that's regarding diversity. And I saw that even within that responsibility, she's grown. You know, you just see the types of quotes that she's going out there to get, very deep quotes. And then not only that, but then she and my youngest son, they participated in some of the protesting in their respective areas. So they live it now. So you can't, you know, the beautiful part about it is that the older kids, they understood what diversity was from their father. But now all of a sudden they can go through their own life experiences and take that foundation that I've given them in terms of what diversity is and really bring all of that together, because they see it on both sides. So their mom was Filipino and Caucasian, and then you have my side. And so now all of a sudden they see a difference, you know. So when you go into a store, you see the difference in terms of, you know, the way that people are treated differently, and you can jump both sides and get a good understanding of that. So I've always tried to do my job in terms of getting them to understand what diversity truly meant and the impact of what diversity was.
Lamont actually raises a really good point that I want to touch on, because these gentlemen have all kind of said it all as it relates to the current events. Social media, though, I've had to have a conversation with these girls around all this current events and the intake of it all and what it does to your psyche from a social media perspective. It's everywhere. It's on their phones 24/7. It's on all of their feeds, all of their stories. And, you know, there is a mental trigger that happens if you watch a white man kneel on a black man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds that their brains may not be equipped to handle. One, you want the information, and I want you to be exposed to the realities of this world and this society. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. But I don't want you desensitized to it. And that's, if you see it too much, you just start to accept it as normal and it becomes no longer an issue. But I also don't want it to dampen their spirits or take that light or that fire from them because they feel they have no future, or that is their only future, and that is the only images that they see of people that look like them. And it's always being snatched up by the cops or being arrested or brutalized or murdered, or like the images, whether they ever experience it personally or not. What social media can do to them simply by the intake and the process of that information can also be very, very damaging. And so, you know, for me as a grown man, I have to turn the phone off and put the phone down sometimes. I have to step away from it. I know at their ages, there's no way they are receiving all of that information at the speed and rate that it's coming in, and that's okay. It's not okay.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, Corey. I too unplug because it's just too much to handle. And I'll be quite honest with everybody here. I did not watch the video, nor did I listen to the video because I knew two things. One, I knew how the story was going to end. Unfortunately, George Floyd. I knew how we had seen this before, and then I knew I would never be able to get it out of my head. I would never be able to unsee or unhear it. So Corey, you bring up, I mean, it's a good point for, for our kids, for our children. And so, and then I've seen some Black dads just break down to tears with, what do I tell my son? Tabitha Brown, I forget her husband, but she's an influencer online, and her husband came onto Instagram and he said, my wife did an amazing job of having a conversation, but he said, I could not have a conversation. I just did not know what to tell my son. And he just kept saying it over and over as if, what do I tell this dude? It's because, and I imagine, and I want you all to chime in here, but he's like, I've been teaching my son, my kid, right, what to do, how to do right, and how to avoid, and if you do this. But once we saw the video, right, which is just a continuation of what we already know to be true. But at that point, he's thinking, what am I going to say to my 8-year-old? And so my question to you all, have you ever had a scare or anything that has really brought you to tears when it comes to being a Black dad?
I could take, well, just, when I'll start with the George Floyd situation. It took me a long time to watch the video. And when I first saw it on social media, I think I saw it before it started being plastered on CNN, and I wasn't sure what it was. So I didn't know what the outcome was. And then when I found out the outcome and everything started to spiral really quickly, I kept turning it off. I kept walking away. I did not want to see this man in his last minutes of life. It hurt me so much to watch this. And then the other hurt of it all is that people try to diminish him personally from the experience. And I'm so, it's two things. I almost cannot believe the outpouring of the world at this situation, but he represented, I think, and I've been more into watching it and really thinking about it. He represented so much the everyday Black man, and I say this in a way because he personally went through the struggle. Yes, it's true. He had some addiction to drugs, but if anybody knows anybody that has had drug addiction in their family, it really is something that it's a disease. It's not like something you can turn off and turn on or something like that. So you have to love that person if they have it. He was trying to do right. He would make videos about kids putting down guns and stuff. This is after he was involved in whatever it was that he was involved in, any criminal activity or being arrested or locked up. I know so many people like him that were young and made mistakes and then got to a point in their life where they said, you know what, I got to do better. Let me leave this environment, go to another environment and see if I can do better for my family and for my children. And he just represented the struggle on many different levels of all of us. And so when to see him laying there, it was like, it really is a turning point, I think. We see it as a turning point for our culture. And I think it was so important that he wasn't like a famous person, or he wasn't like a scholar or an engineer or a doctor or another police officer. This was like an average guy. He's everybody's cousin, everybody's uncle, everybody's friend, and that's what hurt me the most, is that I grew up with guys just like him, that look like him, that act like him, that were him. And I think all of us did. And, it's very painful as a father. And I think I just found out, not just now, but I found out he had 5 kids. And so I'm thinking like, oh man, this is terrible. You got to live with that,
Yeah. So we'll shift the energy. I don't know that we heard from you all about your dads growing up or any mentors, male mentors. I know. So anybody want to share? Talk about your dads and your experience growing up. Because this is the Black Dad Fireside Chat. And I'd love to hear. I mean, because you all are respectable, influential, successful men and Black dads. So how did you become that way? What happened and who did it for you? Who was your guy?
Well, I didn't have a father growing up. I didn't meet my dad until I was almost 30. My mom got pregnant and didn't tell him that she was pregnant, and so he moved back down to Houston from Chicago. So I didn't know him. So because of that, you had to latch on. And so there was an individual named Bob who became my father figure. And the thing about Bob that fascinated me was, as a kid in the projects, the only jobs you have for the most part is going to be, you got blue collar. But Bob had a white collar job. He's an insurance salesman, and to me, he could have been the CEO. Just to see him in suits, to see him, just present in front of people, it meant everything to me, because what it did was it showed me that it was a different world out there. And so he was my main mentor, and he was the one that would pull me aside, and he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I would try to emulate some of the things that he would do. I mean, I'd be fascinated watching him shave, something as simple as that, because I didn't have a male in the house. And so there were things like, there are things that I had to learn from others to be able to teach my sons, because I didn't have it growing up, like fishing. I'd never been fishing, was never taught. I know how to eat it well, but I was never taught. And so just little simple things like that, I try to do with my kids, maybe not fishing just yet, but, just showing them an example of what I didn't have in my home. So little things like that, I get emotional about, because when you don't have that in your home, I would get jealous of my friends that did have fathers in their household. So anyway, so that was my experience.
Charles?
For me, it was my maternal grandfather. I did know my father. He actually, for most of my life, lived no more than 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 10 minutes from me. So I would actually see him, but he had no role in my life. So my role model was my grandfather, and he gave me what I took from him was just the fortitude, the mental toughness. He integrated the fire department in the town that I grew up in New Jersey, and dealt with everything that goes along with that. Being in a space where no one wants you there. But then also was an entrepreneur. Firemen have lots of days off, so he started a floor refinishing business, because he said he never wanted to leave himself vulnerable to the white men who could fire him from the fire department. And so this notion of self-determination and hard, dirty work, because his thing was he never wanted to owe anyone anything. And to watch that strength and to watch that sacrifice, and that was the perfect role model for the kind of man I wanted to be. I didn't necessarily want to do the work that he did, because I didn't see myself working that hard physically. But what I took away from it was the strength that was required to live his life. And so you take what you can from those models, and then along the way there were other men who came through my life, but really my set of values and my outlook on life was largely shaped by him. Because the other thing was that not only was he dealing with a certain situation at the fire department, but as this entrepreneur, you're taking work wherever you can get it. And so over 90% of his customers were white. So to watch him navigate that world while being abused by white folks in his other positions, and just to be able to do that and be successful and have this business go on for 50 years on nothing but referrals, I was just taking notes. I mean, just taking mental notes the entire time about kind of how to navigate through different types of spaces, and how you don't let someone else's opinion or small things move you off of your course and what you're trying to achieve. And those were things that I tried to pass along and still try to pass along to my daughter.
It's interesting. I'm sort of a real extension of my dad. My dad is Clarence Ben Douglas Jr. and I'm Clarence Ben Douglas III. And so, I'm named after him. My parents got married at 19 years old or 18, and my dad 18, and my father was shipped off to Vietnam, and then he came back, and I was born, and then I was born, and he became a police officer in Philadelphia. So I just remember my childhood. They were together for a while, and then they got separated and eventually divorced. But my dad was there all the time. But I always just remember the fear of him is very interesting in this dynamic. The fear of him being a police officer, there was a pride to it back in those days. Like, yeah, my dad's a cop, But there was also that fear of something happening to him because it was the unknown. He then when I became a teenager, he moved to Houston, and I moved with him for a few years and then came back. So my dad's always been in my life. I lived with him for time, and it was there were some very tough times, but what I've realized now, having children, there were a lot of things he was trying to instill in me that, a knuckleheaded teenager wasn't trying to listen to, and I'm grateful for those things, because even though at the time I wasn't trying to listen, they play back in my head now that I have my own kids. And he's one of 10 children, and they grew up in like segregated South, and then moved, their mother died when he was 12, and then they had to move to Philadelphia where his older siblings lived. It was just a whole thing. And so a lot of that, along with the Vietnam experience, along with the police experience, was just put into me, as a growing up. And, it helped me. It toughened me up for sure. But I always had that. As far as other role models, I also during that time seeked other male role models that when my father moved out or moved away and I wasn't living with him, that helped cousins, older uncles, especially my mother's brother, who was just like an incredible man to me. He was just, he was everything to me. As that wasn't my dad. He was like my other dad. And it's interesting. He passed away the day after my birthday, about 14 to 15 years ago. And I always felt it like he just knew, he was very sick. And it's like, I just always feel like he held on to not pass away on my birthday, to wait a day. And it's like, we had a very, he had 4 kids of his own, but I was his nephew and like his other son. And we had a very, very strong bond. And so, I had great male role models growing up.
I love all the different perspectives here. This is great. Like, everybody's got a different story. And so, I am first generation American, actually. Both of my parents are from Panama. And so my mom came here to go to college. She got a scholarship, full scholarship to go to college in the States. That was like a big thing in Panama. Oh, you're going to the States. And my dad basically followed her. He came, he was in love. He was trying to hook up with his boo, and he came to New York. What's so interesting about him, and for me, the biggest takeaway is just the unrelenting work ethic. He came to this country, didn't speak any English, only spoke Spanish. And literally the only job he could get at the time, this is the late 60s, was like sweeping the floor for these Jewish men that owned a chain of auto parts stores. Not even repair. They just sold the parts. They didn't even do the repair. Auto parts stores in the 5 boroughs. And my dad worked for these guys sweeping the floor, ended up moving up in the ranks. The guys wanted to retire. He borrowed some money and bought one of the stores from these guys. Borrowed some money from my mother's family.
Wow.
And so you've got this immigrant, basically, that barely knows English, and he's now an entrepreneur. He's now a business owner. Successful, obviously was able to raise a family, put his family through school and all of that. It was a storefront of a building that had apartments all above it. The landlord kept raising the lease on the storefront, trying to get more money out of him. My father, again, borrowed some money, bought the whole damn building. And so,
Oh, God.
you know, yeah, no,
Wow.
he's awesome, right? But, you know, all of this comes at a price, right? Because you're a business owner. He works 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. That store was open until 6 p.m. I didn't get to spend a lot of time with the entrepreneur because he's running a business. And so mom took me to Little League and mom did all the other things. I didn't have that kind of relationship with this guy because he's running a business. And on Sundays, he's cutting the grass and doing all the other stuff. And he's like, leave me the hell alone because I got to go to work in the morning. So, you know, our relationship, and again, male, right? So he treated me very differently than he treated my sister. He was really tough on me. But that work ethic, you know, I have clear visuals of like blizzards in New York and the cars are stuck in the driveway. You know, I grew up in Jamaica, Queens. His business was in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And my father got up, left the house in a blizzard because in New York, you get fined if you don't shovel the snow in front of your business. And he would go all the way to Brooklyn just to shovel the snow in front of the store in the middle of a blizzard because that's what he had to do as a business owner. And those are the memories I have of him, you know. And as I get older, and now we're best friends, you know, he did that 6 days a week for 40 years before he retired. And now he's retired and he's like, I don't want to do anything. Don't ask me to lift a finger. And it's awesome. Like, Dad, I got it. Don't worry. I take care of it. He plays with his grandbabies and he is all good. So, you know, those are the memories of him. And it's that work ethic. And, you know, I talk about that immigrant struggle on so many levels, especially in the work that I do, because there's so many people that face that. And people of color, whether you're Hispanic, whether you're Black, whatever you are, everybody that is an immigrant has that journey. And again, it's unrelenting. And, you know, you want to make it in this country and you don't know the language and you don't know the people, it's a struggle. But those are the things that are my takeaways from my dad and having him around. I got to see that work ethic every day without failure.
Wow, you guys have great dad stories. Very inspiring. So we're going to do a fast round. And so the question is, you know, what does being a dad mean to you? What do you like most about being a dad? And what advice would you have for aspiring dads? So the question is, what does being a dad mean? What do you like most? And then what advice do you have for other dads? You want to go, Ben?
Yeah, I could go. Being a dad means for me is the ultimate responsibility. You have been, you know, you've created this life, and now you know, God gave you this life to watch over for him, and you are charged with protecting, feeding, clothing, everything. You know, this is your child, and so that's what it means for me. It is the ultimate responsibility. You know, if I had to get up and go shovel, is to say, you know what I mean? It's like Corey's saying his dad understood that. Like, it's unfortunate you lose a little bit of the parent connection because you're trying to be the dad, you know, the father, and do all. And what was the second part? The second one was
what do you like most about being a dad? I mean, you kind of shared a little bit, but what do you like most about being a dad?
What I like most, just spending time with my wife, with my children, seeing them smile when I come in the door. You know, I'm away a lot because of work, and, you know, they're like, how many days before the little ones are like, how many days before you get back? And, you know, they're drawing pictures of me and FaceTiming me and taking snapshots of the FaceTime and stuff like that. I love that stuff. The one thing I would tell a young dad, I'm a terrible cook. Like, I don't know how to really cook anything. So I would say to a young dad, learn how to cook like 5 meals that you can prepare for the kids, because it will drive you crazy when you got to keep saying, well, when mommy gets home, she's going to make it. And then looking at you, a grown man, like, you can't boil water or like that kind of stuff. So I've actually gotten better. My girls have made me better. My son, I would be like, you just got to wait. But my girls, I'm like, all right, let me get up and figure it out. I will make you noodles. So I would say to a young father, find like 5 meals that you can cook and prepare.
That's good. That's good. That's specific. Corey, you're laughing. can you chime in here? What's your advice, and
No,
what is it to you?
absolutely.
And what do
You better learn how to cook. I've burned chicken nuggets, and it's like that's impossible to do. So I'm good now. I to Benny's point, I mastered like 3 or 4 meals that I know I can handle, and I'm like I can chef it up. But that's great advice. Look, I think the best thing about being a dad is watching them grow and seeing their success and watching their little personalities develop, you know. And it's tough, and it's a hard thing. They've taught me to be a better person. So somebody said it earlier, you have to be super patient and super tolerant, and these kids will force you to do that, you know. In my particular case, my 2 oldest ones, they don't live with me, they live with their mom. And so, you know, I have this habit that I wake up every morning during the school year. Summers, I'm not so much, but every morning I send them a good morning text, no matter where I am.
Wow.
If I'm on the West Coast, I adjust my time so that even though it's 4 a.m. for me, they're at 7 a.m. Good morning. And it's because they're not with me every day, but they need to know that I love and adore and would do anything on this planet for them, even if I don't see them every day. And so, you know, they've taught me how to love better, how to be just a better person overall. And so any advice for patience is key. They're going to drive you up the wall, and you just gotta, all right, you gotta woo side out some days. They are going to test you, and the older they get, the harder the tests become. So just be patient and take it easy.
Charles?
I'd say what it means to me, it's kind of a combination of what Benny and Corey said. You know, watching their accomplishments, watching them, you know, watching Morgan bloom into a grown woman, watching Grace, you know, as she kind of is finding her way. That's my favorite part. Hearing them say "I love you" is my favorite part. You know, what it means is that sense of responsibility that, again, never really goes away. You know, you feel like that you always need to be there. You always need to be available when they need you, and you know, that's just part of it. It becomes second nature. I think advice that I would give to young men who are about to be parents is like, keep your ego out of it. You know, especially if you have a partner that you're working with. Like, don't have your daughter out here looking crazy in the streets because you got to prove that you could do her hair. Like, you know, and if you can, then cool. But I couldn't, and so I'm not going to try to prove something. You know, don't do what I can't do, but, you know, show up for the things that I can do. So that's where I would say, like, get your ego out of the situation and just, you know, be there and show up in the ways that you can, add that value that you can. But if the other parent has it, you know, in a particular area better than you, get out of the way, because it really is about your kid. It's not about, you could do her hair, like, you know, and if you can, then cool.
You know, first of all, I do know how to cook, so but I tell you, you know, being a father, especially being a widower of 5, you know, you're everything for your kids. You know, the hardest thing that I had to do was to wake up and tell 3 of my 5 kids that their mom died. And so when that happens, I know when COVID came, I got anxiety because I'm all they got. And so for me, there's a responsibility that's at the highest level that you can possibly have. You know, I had lost my job, and, you know, several months after I lost my wife. And so, you know, now you're in a situation where you're like, you know what, now they're looking at me, how am I going to respond to this? And so that level of responsibility, it goes up much higher, because you've got to show them that you've got the mettle, you've got everything that you possibly have in your body to make sure that those kids have food on the table, clothes on their back, and a roof over their heads. So for me, that level of responsibility is something that I think about every single day. We pray every night. And when we pray, you know, even if the other kids aren't at home, you know, we're praying for them. So again, it's just responsibility. And so the advice that I would give someone is, you know, make sure that you show love to others. You know, the kids are like sponges. And so if they don't see that you're being respectful, my wife and I, we had problems. We were actually separated before finding out that she had cancer. But the one thing that I always made sure that I did was I showed her respect. And so I wanted the kids to see that. So still opening up the door and, just, being grateful that you have somebody that at least was in